Hi, how's it going? So, I've been playing around with Godot today, just today, and I'm pleasantly surprised with how easy it is to work with. So just to demonstrate this, I'm going to run through and make a simple game. I'm going to make Tic Tac Toe. Here's one I made earlier, but I'm going to go through this, and this will just be a rough first impressions video, basically. So here I have the Godot program. It's standalone. I just ran it. It's like 120 megabytes as opposed to 35 gigabytes. I just go new project, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for, I'll go dev, Godot. There we have it. I'm going to make a folder, and this folder is going to be called my game. There we go. We'll just say select current folder. And then right here, I'm going to make my game. Just make sure I hit the create folder. Let's not do that. Okay, there we go. I'll fix that up. What? Okay, select current folder. I'm clicking too fast. That's the problem. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, now this just, it all loads up. And now I'm just going to jump into the folder structure and set this up. So I went into, where are we? Went into Godot, and I have this, my game folder. Oh, there we go. It's got everything for me. Great. So I've also got these images. I'm going to be making Tic Tac Toe. These images are just for the various players. I just played around in GIMP and sketched these out super quickly. I'll be using all of those. So I'll just grab those assets, drag them into the game. They're there in the folder. Currently, I just have this project file, the icon, that's it. So I'll just close this down, and you can see that this has been loaded in down here. That's great. Now I'm just going to switch over to two-dimensional, and I'm going to make a scene. Now, the way this works is sort of like a hierarchical tree structure. So you can make scenes, and then you can instantiate scenes within other scenes, if that makes sense. So when we think of scene, just think of a tree of nodes, and a scene is a collection of nodes, that tree, which can stand alone as a module and be edited, if that makes sense. So what I'm getting to is I'm going to make one scene to represent a piece that goes on the board, and I'm going to make another scene to represent the whole game. So I'll go ahead and create a root node, and I'm going to call this a piece. Now I'll just go ahead and save this. Now we have this resource URL. That's actually sort of a virtual folder here. It's not a real folder on my hard disk. But anyway, I'll just save this as a piece.tscn. That's a text scene. We have that. Okay, and I'm going to need a few things in order to edit this. So I'm just going to right click, and I can add a child node. I can add as many of these as I want. The first thing I'll need is a representation of the piece itself. So I will go ahead and search for a sprite 2D. There we have one. It's up there. Currently has nothing, but we can go ahead and say, take this empty piece, drag it over to the texture field, and there we have something. Okay. Then I'm going to just drag this over so that if I run this right now, I can see it directly. So what we can do is just save this. I'm just going to click run here. Now there are two options, run project or run current scene. I'm just going to go run project. You can imagine how this will work. Now, currently this will say, hey, we don't have a scene. All we do is select the current scene, and it goes ahead and loads it up. And there we can see the thing. Okay, great. So now I'm going to add some interactivity so that we can click on this. In order to do that, first of all, I'll add some logic. So I'll go to the piece scene, the root node, right click, and say attach script. And I'm going to call this piece.gd. Okay, no problem. We just say create. And before we were in the two-dimensional view, now we've clicked over to this script view. So we have two functions to be made for us, ready and process, and I'm actually going to get rid of all of them for now. We'll get back to that later. Okay, so right now we just have an empty script. Now, the purpose of having the empty script is I'm going to make something which generates a click event, a click signal, emits a click signal, and then I'm going to consume that click signal in my script. So what I'll do is I'll just right click. Now, I'll admit I had a lot of trouble with this. This isn't going to be a 100% perfect review of Godot. This is my first impressions. Every system, every engine, programming language, whatever, has something which is more complicated than it should be. In my opinion, just my opinion, coming in from zero experience, clicking on sprites is more complicated than it should be. Okay, so here's how I solved the problem. I went and added a child, and I used a button object. There are other things like area 2D and collision shapes and things like that, but this button object works best, I found. So currently the button object has been created here. There we go, the button object is currently here. I want to set this so that it's about the same size and on top of the button. So all I do is go here to scale mode, go shift and drag to scale that up, and that looks about the size of the button. I'll just bring it over. Maybe make that a little smaller. Great, okay. So it's covering the interior of the button, more or less. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll click on the button, and then I'll go over here to, we have inspector, that's the properties of the button, and then here to node, we have all of these signals that we can connect. So I'm going to click on the pressed signal, double click there, and I'm going to connect this to a script. I'm going to connect it to the piece script. So I'll just say go connect, and by the way, it says down here, it will make this method for me and connect it up automatically on button pressed. There we have that there, and I'm just going to print something. So I'm just going to print clicked. Excellent. Now I'll give this a go. I'll go ahead and run this. See, we have our button there, and then it's definitely detecting our mouse properly. When we click on it, it says clicked. But clearly we've got a problem. Firstly, the button shouldn't be visible at all. And secondly, what's going on here? So we can fix all of that actually, but I just want to simulate a bit of debugging. So if we go back to 2D mode, currently we have this visibility option. Now if I click this, the button is not visible. That's great. But then when we play this and I click it, it's also not detecting my click event. So that's not the way to do it. So this is the solution that I found. And that is we go down to, clicking on button. So in the inspector, this is strongly based around inheritance. So we have that a button inherits from a base button, that's like the abstract base class, and then a base button inherits from a control node, because this is a control node. We have control nodes for GUI stuff, and then 2D nodes and 3D nodes. Anyway, and the thing I'm really interested in is the canvas item superclass. So I'll go to visibility, and it's this option here, this self-modulate. We have this RGBA. All I'm going to do is set the alpha to 0. So it's still doing what it should be doing. It's just that that's going to be completely invisible. So I run this, we see it, we click on it, we see that it's generating that click event down there, and it's also not doing anything visually weird. Okay, so now I'm going to edit the script a little bit more. So I'll pop in here to that script, and I'm just going to put in a few variables. So I was pleasantly surprised by how similar GD script is to Python. A lot of stuff I didn't have to look up. You just, So we're going to have some state, which is basically which image or which player is currently occupying that piece. And then I'm going to have another variable, which just tracks whether that piece has been clicked at all. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just check if this thing has been clicked. And if it has, then end straight away. There we go. All right. So if I run this right now, this will pretty much, what am I thinking? This will pretty much just click once. So we have the button. We're testing the button. Click on the button. It says, yep, I got clicked. Click on the button again. Nothing happens. Perfect. Okay. Now things are going to get complicated because this I'm trying to treat as an individual component that doesn't know about the rest of the world. But to a certain extent, I do need to know about the game a little bit. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to fetch my parent object. Now, the way this getNode works is by default, it gets a subnode. So we have a button attached as a subnode. We have a sprite 2D attached as a subnode. We also have this dot. Now, if you're familiar with the Unix file system, a dot is the current folder. In other words, self. And if I want to get my parent, I'll go like I'm going to get a subnode, but I'll go one directory up. So this will get the parent. Okay, now of course if I run this right now, it's going to completely fail. So I'll put a little fail check in there. I'll say if parent is null, just, you're done. Just return. So, yeah, the Godot docs are really good for looking up methods like this. But anyway, let's have a go. We have the button. Now if I click it, oh, not great. Or maybe there is a parent. Maybe there's a default parent. What would I know? Okay, anyway, but this will work. Right, so that is the individual button component, and now I'm going to be a little bit preemptive. I'm going to pretend that I have a game object, which is the parent, and I can work with it. So what I'll do is I'm going to fetch the sprite for the corresponding player. Now, just like Python, you can type hint these things, these variables. Okay, so this is going to be, like I said, a little speculative because I'm writing code that I haven't written yet. But just note that this function starts with an underscore. An underscore is an indicator that a function should be a private method, should only be called internally. On the other hand, this function down here, this method, is public. There's no underscore at the start, but that's not really enforced. Okay, so as you can see here, we're just going to grab, is it player 1, is it player 2, and then we are going to tell them which player we want to get the texture for, and set that as the display texture. So the piece will change. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this piece. What I can do is just go right up to the top here and say scene, new scene, and I'm just going to go over to 2D, and I'll make a 2D scene, which I will call the game. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and save that. And now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab this, I'm just going to grab this piece here and shift it back sort of to the origin. Won't be perfect, but that's fine. Yeah, I'm just thinking there. Yeah, I think that's fine. All right, so let's go ahead and make the game. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and add a label. Go to the text here for the label, and I'll put in the game name. Tic Tac Toe. Alrighty, cool. So I'll just go ahead, scale, shift click to keep it the aspect ratio, drag that over. There's my game label there. Okay, so far so good. So now I'm going to flip over to script mode. So I'll just go attach a script. I'll call this game.gd. Okay, by the way, you can see here that we're in script mode. There are two ways to flip around. These are just like recent scripts. So I can flick back to piece.gd, game.gd. I can also switch scene here. It'll do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically load all my textures. And the way I do this is with the preload method. Now the preload method takes in a URL of a texture or an asset that I want to load. In this case, it will be these pieces. So the empty circle will be player 1 and cross will be player 2. Okay, so there's a few things I'm going to do. I'm going to get rid of the process. Now, I am going to have an initializer here. So this, again, this ready is called once everything is initialized. I'm just going to make a function. I'm going to call that, right player. And this will just write out whose turn it is to play. Okay, so like I said, this isn't going to be a completely positive review. There are two things I am having trouble with. One of them is, why is it so tricky to click on a two-dimensional object with my mouse? And the second one of those is, if we have a type hinting system, why is that type hinting system not better at code completion? So if I'm specifying that I'm going to fetch an instance node, then why does this not have a set, like why is it not auto-completing set text? It's weird, right? Anyway, just things to think about. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write out whose turn it is. Okay, now if I go to run this, it will actually run the other scene. So what what am I thinking? I'll have to, there we go. All right, so I'll just go to project settings, and then run. And I'll just change the main scene from the piece to the game. Tic Tac Toe. Okay, open that up. Now if I run this, it's player 1's turn. Perfect. Excellent. All right, so now onto the fun stuff, populating the pieces. Okay, so what I'm doing here is, like I said, you can preload any assets. You can preload an image. You can also preload a scene. And what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and instantiate that. That creates an instance of the scene, which is just like, it's like classes and instances, basically. So what I'll do is I will add that piece as a child. And I need to do that so that the pieces get parent node function. If we go back here, when we call get parent node, this needs to be added as a child so that it will refer back to the game. There are other ways to do it, I imagine. So what I'll do is I'll then append that to the row, and the strategy that I'm going with here, I wonder if this works. Okay, so what I want, if you haven't seen this sort of thing before, is I want to get like a bunch of things in row 1, and then row 2, then row 3, just like that. So that's why I'm sort of filling this in row by row. It's going to be a two-dimensional like list of lists. Okay, great. So we are done with that. Interestingly, if I were to run this right now, all the pieces are being created at the origin. We're not setting the position. So in order to do that, I'm going to make a public method for the piece, which will basically set its position. And I guess I'll call it initialize. So in order to set the position, I'll construct a vector 2, and that will be, Oh, what am I? Okay. And I'll put in the X and Y. So for the... Okay, so for the X, that'll be the column. And this is a width, I think, of 64 times 64, so we'll go with that. And for the Y, that will be the row. So then I'll go back to the game, and I've got the piece. Before I do anything with it, I'll initialize it. Just like that. Okay, cool. Now look at that. It just worked out. It just worked out. Now, if it didn't work out, we could just modify the numbers. I think in the example that I did before, we could do things like, okay, if we go like if this was too far up, for instance, we could go column plus 2 to shift everything 2 columns down, run that. Oh, whoops. To the right, I mean, you know. I mean, what I'm trying to highlight is just how easy this stuff is to use, at least right now for simple cases. Okay, I'll stop talking. So we've created all of these, and we can actually, oh, there's a few things I need to do. I'll return the current player and get the texture. Okay, cool. So let's try this. Currently we've got player 1, which is the circle. So we click there, we create the circle, but now we've got a problem, and the problem is that this is not updating. So I'm going to return to signals. Remember that we had a button for each of these, and within the piece component, we could wire that button signal up to its own internal script. But now we're dynamically creating these things. So the question is, how do we connect that signal to us, basically? So what I'll do is I'll go to the piece, and I will declare a custom signal called dropped. Okay, like a piece was dropped on the board. Okay, and then I'll go right down and I'll say dropped emit, if I can spell. Great. So we're going to pass out that signal. Then what I need to do on this end is I'm going to close this down. Let's make a new function. Okay, so that next turn function is what I want to connect to the dropped signal. So I've got this piece right now. I'll take that piece, take its dropped signal, and connect it to my next turn. So that will be my handler for that signal. Okay, so let me just print out piece dropped just to test that this is working. All right, we'll give that a go. We click on something, and in fact, we are registering it. Excellent, that's so cool. So let's go ahead and just switch around the players. Okay, so we just toggle the player basically, give that a go, and we go, okay, player 1, player 2, player 1, player 2, great. So I'm going to add a few win checks, and for this there will be a little bit of typing, bit of logic, and it's a bit of a slog, but let's get on it. So we'll go right winner. Okay, cool. So just print out to that label which player won. But now I'm going to go through the various cases, and I will copy paste this because it's a lot. But here's the basic idea. So first of all, I'll go hard one first, or annoying one first, checking diagonals. So what I'll do is I'm going to check from the top left down. So I'll say, okay, top left corner, which player is there? Now, if there's nothing there, then we're done. But if there is something there, then we want to look through the diagonal line. So we go ahead, you know, so 001122 and all of that. I want to check their state and see if they match the piece that I saw in the top corner. Now, if any of them do not match, then we know we didn't win and we break out of there. Now, in order for this to work, I'll need to add a getState method to the piece, but that's no problem. I'll just close this down and say, there we go. Yeah, return the state. Excellent. Okay, so having done that, we then check the other diagonal. Now, the other diagonal will start at the top of the board and go down. That's why I'm using I here. But then it will go from the right column to the left column. So 2, 1, 0, which is why I've got this 2 minus I here. Okay, same logic. But then if we get right through everything and neither of these cases were set off, then yeah, we did not win. Okay, now, next case is checking columns. So we want to run along from left to right. So J is running from left to right. Same logic. So we look at the top row in the appropriate column. And if there's nothing there, no player there, then we just continue on to the next column. Otherwise, we then run down the rows of that column. And if we see something that doesn't match what we originally saw, we need to have all three pieces in the column the same, so we return false. Sorry, we don't win. We look at the next one, and so on and so on. Okay, so we've got check columns, then we'll check rows. Okay, very similar. Peruse that for a second. It's basically doing pretty much the same as check columns. Yeah, okay. So anyway, we've got three ways we can win, either a row, a column, or diagonal. So now I'm going to make another function to check whether we won. And this can be nice and simple. We can just go there we go. It's a nice logical return there. And so when I go to the next turn, before I go to the next turn, I check if we've won. Okay. Now the next case I want to deal with is stalemate. So I'll go down here and I'll make a right stalemate. Okay. And then I'll need a check stalemate. So basically I just want to check through. If I see an empty spot anywhere, then more moves can be made. So it's not in a state of stalemate. But then if we get through everything and nothing sets off, then yeah, we are definitely in stalemate. So we've got that. All right. So I'll get down here, I'll say if we're in stalemate. Otherwise, it's the other player's turn, so write that out. Okay, so I think that more or less covers everything that I wanted to do. We sort of done a whirlwind tour of Godot, but the big thing to pay attention to is we have scenes and nodes. Every scene has a root node. Every scene is an individual module, and scenes can be parents to other scenes. So for instance, the game is a scene, the piece is a scene, we have a parent-child relationship, and scenes can pass messages to other scenes, signals. Okay, so we can pop through here. It's player 1, now it's player 2, player 1, player 2. Oh, that's not great. Okay. So here's a situation, I believe. Looks like we had a winner, but then the function continued and went on and did the rest. All right, so let's try this again. All right, so player one's going to go straight down. What am I going to do? Says X. I'll do something else. There, player one won. Okay, give that another go. Yep, great. Yeah, okay, great, perfect. So this isn't a perfect program. It's graphically, it needs an improvement. And also we can keep playing after we've won. No, nobody won. But anyway, hopefully you can see some of the basics of Godot and just how fun it is to use. But yeah, that's all I wanted to do. This is just a quick, chill coding session. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.